away to my Father, but I will return.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. I further bear witness that Allah came in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, and that he raised the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and has placed him on the throne of power over the universe. And I further bear witness that the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is the Lamb of God, his Christ, through whom Allah is establishing his eternal kingdom. Assalamu alaikum. I am Karriem Allah, and thank you for taking time to view this very important message. We begin with these verses from the Holy Quran. When Joseph said to his father, "O my father, I saw 11 stars in the sun and the moon. I saw them making obeisance to me." He said, "O my son, relate not thy dream to thy brethren, lest they devise a plan against thee. The devil indeed is an open enemy to man." Now, our aim is to continue to correlate the life of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan in the history of the lost foundation of Islam with the fulfillment of the messianic prophecies described in both the Holy Quran and in the Bible. Why is this important? As we gain more understanding about the unfolding of the biblical narratives, we gain a new perception of life, which will make our lives in the world a better place. That's the destiny. This objective is at the root of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, who can deny that the knowledge of the origin and purpose of this present world is important? Yet, our lives are placed on an assembly line as soon as we're born to be used by the aristocratic families that govern the world of the Caucasian people, this satanic world. And most of us never consider, even for a moment, why this world is so wicked and so unjust. At every turn, there's inequality, there's injustice. Why is this? And there seems to be no resolution, only the intensifying of these scourges. Well, through the Holy Quran, Allah informs us that the wicked rulers of this satanic world, of the Caucasian people, have made evil fair seeming and attractive to nearly everyone. This was and is the primary purpose of the Caucasian people when they were manufactured on the island of Patmos nearly 6,000 years ago, or more than 6,000 years ago. And this too is narrated in the Holy Quran. I'm going to quote several verses and just add a brief commentary to show how the Holy Quran aligns with the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad on the origin of this world. Well, we read from the Holy Quran. "And when thy Lord said to the angels, I am going to create a mortar of sounding clay, of black mud fashioned into shape. So when I have made him complete and breathed into him of my spirit, fall down, making obeisance to him." Now, these verses relate to the redemption of the black people of America in particular, wherein God comes in person to make a new ruler of the earth from among his chosen people. And this new ruler is the Messiah, the Christ, that is the new ruler of the entire world. Now let's continue with the remaining verses. "So the angels made obeisance, all of them, but Iblis did not. He refused to be of those who made obeisance. He, Allah, said, O Iblis, what is the reason that thou art not with those who make obeisance? He said, I am not going to make obeisance to a mortal whom thou hast created of sounding clay, of black mud fashioned into shape. Again, this refers to the making of the Messiah, the Christ. He said, Allah, then go forth, surely thou art driven away, and surely on thee is a curse till the day of judgment. Now, again, we know that the angels who have made obeisance are the 24 or the 23 who cast their crowns before the throne when the Lamb of God made his way to the throne to be with the one who sat on the throne. This is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. So the angels of God have submitted to Allah's will, but the Caucasian people who are now here, Iblis, and particularly the synagogue of Satan, they refuse to bow down to the Messiah who brings in the new world of the kingdom of God. Now, again, the synagogue of Satan is made up of several families that we have already discussed in previous messages. These families are the one whom the great God, Master Fard Muhammad, the one who came and is governing the affairs with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, whom he's placed on the throne. He saw himself at the age of 6 years old casting the family of the synagogue of Satan into the blazing fire. And these families were the Rockefeller, Astor, Rothschilds, and DuPonts. They are the architects of this satanic world under the guidance of Yaqub, their maker. Now, of course, they have rejected the Messiah according to these verses, and Allah has cursed them till the day of judgment, meaning till the period of time where the mercy of God runs out on them, and then God comes down with his judgment upon them. Now, curse means to be driven far away from the presence of God. So if you're following somebody who's cursed, then just know that you're completely off the path of God entirely. So you can expect your world to be nothing but living hells for the short time that you've given, and I am giving life to breathe by following them, the synagogue of Satan. Now, continuing, he said, Iblis, my Lord, respite me till the time when they are raised. He said, surely thou art of the respited ones. Respite meaning to give time. He has a measure of time to do his act. Till the period of time made known. Again, the judgment. He said, again, Iblis, my Lord, as thou hast judged me erring, I shall certainly make evil fair seeming to them on earth, and I shall cause them all to deviate, except thy servants from among them, the purified ones. Now, again, this refers to the time of the coming of Master Fard Muhammad and his raising up of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So Satan has hatched a plan that since I won't accept the fulfillment of the prophecies that talks about the coming of God and the raising of his Messiah as the new ruler to usher in the kingdom of God, since I won't go along with that, then I'm going to make his chosen people deviate by making evil fair seeming to them. Now, this has everything to do with why it was necessary on the part of the Caucasian people, the synagogue of Satan in particular, to forge integration. It wasn't black people. We wanted justice and equality. And we had something, separate but equal was the term that we, sufficiently could live with, because we were already isolated and ostracized, but only in a way of inequality, as you all know in the history. So now integration has to come in, meaning that they have to pull black people from their isolation and from their morals and their dignity into the life and social concepts and falsehood of the synagogue of Satan, the Caucasian people. So now we can adopt their social concepts, their wickedness, their immorality. This is what is being said in these verses from the Holy Quran. Now, so the social concepts of this world shape our minds into embracing wicked thoughts and behaviors. Where else do you get them from? This is how evil is made acceptable and attractive to us. Now, only those who realize and understand how this is done have a chance to overcome this world of deception. And these, of course, are the purified ones who obey and follow the guidance of Allah coming through his Messiah. And very few are they today. And we're going to get to that point later on. Now, of course, this is not an easy task for anyone, because the synagogue of Satan has lodged its wickedness within its social and government systems. And we need to think about that, because while we're trying to get one man out of office and another man in office, and while we're trying to do things in a system that's already set up on wickedness, God has ordered that such systems be destroyed. That's another subject for another time. And there's a way that that's going to be done. And inshallah, we'll address that in the future. Now, what do we mean by the synagogue of Satan lodging its wickedness in its social systems? Well, let's consider the arts and entertainment sector, particularly television, motion pictures, and music. Unrighteous behaviors and slander of others are promoted through these channels. Just consider the fact that movies and television series are made about real people, but such people are portrayed in a way remotely distant from their actual lives and the actual events in their lives. Now, once upon a time when they had a show called Dragnet, Dragnet had a disclaimer. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. So the dramatization didn't bring about or didn't give you the names of the actual people who were involved in those crimes upon which those episodes were based in Los Angeles. Now is open season to spread lies and slander using bogus disclaimers, which give Hollywood the license to ruin the lives of people by slandering them. Now, what is slander? Most of us should know what slander is. There's not a person probably who's walking around who has some friends or some social interaction that has not been lied upon. Well, slander is the action or crime of making a false spoken statement that is damaging to a person's reputation. Now, the series, The Godfather of Harlem, is a prime example of this type of wickedness. Now, consider this from a recent article in the New York Post about this series, The Godfather of Harlem. It states, each episode of Godfather of Harlem carries a disclaimer that while the series is inspired by actual persons and events, certain characterizations, incidents, locations, and dialogue were invented for dramatic purposes. For instance, Brancato, I think that's the name, well, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correct, but that's the name of one of the creators, says he and co-creator Paul Eckstein took some historical license, meaning freedom, to do what they want to do in Sunday night's finale. Quote, these specific actions are the product of my imagination. Yet they're real people who are dramatized in this series. Adam Clayton Powell, Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and some of the Italian families. Now, is this bogus disclaimer that Hollywood now puts on its series that gives it the freedom to slander people, so-called legally? But there's no legality in the Holy Quran when it comes to slander. And see, this is what this world will soon know. We are creators or creations of Allah. And He has given us guidance upon which human behavior is to be governed. So while you may legitimize something, He doesn't. And since you don't have the power that He has, then we will meet the consequences of our violation of divine law. We're going to get to that in a minute too, because we will soon know that there's a God in power that don't like and disdain and hates the way human beings are conducting business among themselves. Now, this bogus claimer is not sufficient to keep the ignorant masses who don't even read disclaimers. It doesn't keep them from believing that these events are true. So they develop certain biases and certain hatreds and certain attitudes, not just through the Godfather of Harlem series, but everything that comes through Hollywood is designed to take our minds and taint it to a certain way that we should think about things, a certain position we should have on a certain person, and a certain view that we should have. But it's all based on slander and wickedness. Now, what is the purpose of this series, The Godfather of Harlem? Of all the things of good that the public needs to know right now, that will help embolden our lives to do better, the synagogue of Satan continues to pour filth and wickedness into the hearts and minds of the people through slander. Now, again, you may accept that because we want entertainment and evil has been made fair seeming to us. So we'll gobble it down like pigs in a slop trough. But again, Allah wants us to behave differently. Now, Chris Brancato and Paul Eckstein, whose evil imaginations created this slander series, have demonstrated, as with others like them, disrespect for the family of Malcolm X, disrespect for the family of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, disrespect for the family of Adam Clayton Powell, and disrespect for the Italian families that it's portraying, particularly these current generations, and disrespect for the families of those whose parents and grandparents sacrificed their lives to support men like Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Adam Clayton Powell, as they fought against the wickedness of the Caucasian government and the Caucasian people. So is your motive hatred because they were strong enough to stand up against your wickedness and tyranny? And mind you, during that time, we were isolated, being bit with dogs and sprayed with hoses. Keep that point in mind. Now, as for the actors who willfully participate in this gross slander, they go along with it for the sake of money. We know that. For the sake of fame, and we want Emmy Awards and other awards. However, the money they make will not be able to alleviate their burdens of guilt and shame, especially when they become more aware of their role in producing an ever-increasing degenerate society. And that's a point to keep in mind. So while an actor may be raising his fist or her fist to champion some other cause, your dramatizations, your acting careers of filth and indecency is bringing that upon the people. It's through you that the synagogue of Satan is making the world in which we live. But you get a little morsels from it and maybe a little bling bling. But again, that won't cover the guilt that Allah is putting on you and the intensification of that guilt that's coming soon. Now, Again, this is the case for all actors who portray murder, violence, and other forms of wickedness, which is pervasive throughout television and throughout film. And no one can argue with that. Now, in the Holy Quran, in Surah 71, chapter 71, it states, "Surely we sent Noah to his people, saying, warn thy people before there come to them a painful chastisement. He said, O my people, surely I am a plain warner to you, that you should serve Allah and keep your duty to him and obey me. He said, my Lord," Noah meaning, "I have called my people night and day, but my call has only made them flee the more. And whenever I call to them that thou mayest forgive them, they thrust their fingers into their ears and cover themselves with their garments and persist and are big with pride. Then surely I have called to them aloud, then spoken to them in public and spoken to them in private. So I have said to them, ask forgiveness of your Lord. Surely he is ever forgiving." Now Noah too prefigures the Messiah who comes in the last days, again represented by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but more specifically the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Now, as such, these words of these verses could also be the words of the Messiah. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan has spoken publicly, the last 40 plus years in particular, and he's spoken to some of the leaders of these industries of entertainment, publicly and privately. He's spoken to government officials, publicly and privately, law enforcement, publicly and privately. Unfortunately, as the people of Noah rejected Noah, we too have rejected Allah's divine warners in the presence and work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. And the condition of society shows that. Now, over the last 80 plus years of hearing the divine warning of both men combined, evil and rebellion have only increased and intensified. Now let's continue with the next several verses from Surah 71 regarding Noah. "And Noah said, my Lord, leave not of the disbelievers any dweller on the land. For if thou leave them, they will lead astray thy servants and will not beget any but immoral, ungrateful ones." Now, this is a big petition that Noah is making to Allah. He's essentially saying to Allah that the disbelievers who have rejected the divine warning, which in that case was most people, because Noah only had his family and a handful of others that escaped the flood. And according to the prophecies, not many will escape this day. Well, Noah's request, in his request, he's telling God that these disbelievers will only produce offspring that disbelieve, and that the disbelief of these offspring will be more intense than their fathers or forebears. In other words, they will be worse than their parents. And today we have to admit that what we see coming from generations today is worse than we've ever seen it. Now, Noah's request that God destroy all the disbelievers speaks to the law of genetics. That's part of where we want to go. Generally, we know that physical and behavior traits are passed through the genetics. We already know that. You give a birth to a child, that child resembles the physical traits of its parents, father and mother, but also some of the behavioral inclinations, because both are constructed of knowledge and of thought. And that's the danger of being in a world of falsehood and accepting false concepts. Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad sheds light on this subject through his teachings on the origin of this world. Now, in his book, Message to the Black Man in America, he states regarding the making of the Caucasian people, as well as the brown and yellow races, the following. The history or future of Mr. Yaqub and his people was in the nation's book by the writers, the 23 scientists of our history, 8,400 years before his birth. Now, according to our knowledge of how we produce history, there are 23 that actually do the writing, and the 24th is Allah, the supreme being who acts as judge. He decides what he will permit to unfold in that 25,000 year cycle of time. Now, what does this mean? This means that the Caucasian people were never the real shot callers. So while black people and others, but namely us, want to go and petition and beg Caucasian people for justice, freedom, equality, opportunity, well, they're not the real shot callers. They were made for a purpose, and that purpose was to deny you everything and me everything we're begging them for. That's why we're still begging in 2019, getting ready to go into 2020. Now, in the current 25,000 year cycle of the time of the original people's history, this current 25,000 year cycle, Yaqub and his people were allotted 6,000 years to rule in wickedness, which they have done. In their time, according to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, expired in the year 1914. And we're just dealing with the residue and fumes of their wickedness. Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad continues to inform us how Yaqub's teaching went into the genes in the genetics of the races. He states, his, Yaqub's aim was to kill and destroy the black nation. He ordered the nurses to kill all black babies that were born among his people by pricking the brains with a sharp needle as soon as the black child's head is out of the mother. He continues, there was no good taught to them while on the island. By teaching the nurses to kill the black baby and save the brown baby so as to graft the white out of it, by lying to the black mother of the baby, this lie was born into the very nature of the white baby. And murder for the black people also born in them or made by nature a liar and a murderer. Now, well, here in America, the original people have been under the teachings and influence of Yaqub through his synagogue of Satan. Again, the families charged with continuing the teachings and plan of Yaqub. Well, what has been the result of the dominance of this falsehood on the original people? It has been the saturation of the earth with falsehood, combined or accompanied by robbery, rape, murder, exploitation, and unfathomable atrocities due to the immeasurable hatred of human beings one towards another. The self-hatred of black people manifested in black on black crime and murder means that hatred that Yaqub put in his races and in the Caucasian people specifically has affected the genetics of black people. So when we discuss so-called institutional racism, we need to know exactly what we're talking about and who's responsible. Now, through the synagogue of Satan's mass media system, again, television, movies, and the filthy music that's out there, each generation born is genetically more inclined to embrace and exude immorality, hatred, and the disrespect of human life. Again, Noah wanted God to destroy all the disbelievers because you're only going to produce offspring that's 7 times the child of hell than the disbelievers that God intends to destroy. Now, this is verified in the Bible, what I'm saying, in these words. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every evil or every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Meaning it's getting worse. Progressive evil is what we're dealing with today. The evil today is far more worse than it was 10 years ago, and certainly far more worse than what it was 100 years ago. So just reflect on the evil imaginations of Hollywood producers and creators of series and movies, such as Chris Brancato and Paul Eckstein. And of course, their rodeos, others like them. Again, of all the things that you could do of good, you have this filth in front of the people. And you get awards for being filthy. But you don't get an award by the Supreme Being. You already cursed. You may or may not know it. And if you know it, it's a mercy from God. If you don't, it ain't. And most of you don't know how filthy you are in your portrayal of wickedness and evil and murder. Now let's continue by considering the gross human trafficking of women, which is now mentioned in the news media. Have we considered the effects on the people from the many instances in film and television where women are portrayed as sex objects, objects for murder? If there must be a murder in the movie, let it be a murder and rape of a woman. Women are portrayed as objects for sexual exploitation and trafficking in television series and movies. What about the scenes where the theme of the movie is, it ain't personal, it's business, which is used to justify wickedness against women for the sake of $1? See, that's what pimps do. And that's with those who are stealing women, kidnapping them and putting them in brothels. It ain't personal. It's just business. Well, that don't add up to the Holy Quran. And soon you will see that it doesn't. Now, are these inhumane portrayals through movies and television installed in the genetics of the men and women who are born today and who will be born tomorrow? That's the big question. That in watching all of this wickedness and glorifying in it, what's coming out of that mother's womb? What's in that father's sperm? Is that which will produce monsters. And that's what we have, a monstrous society. So indeed, we live in a time where there's total and complete disregard for human life, and it's getting worse. So in the Holy Quran, which is the book of the Messiah, or that the Messiah is using and will use to judge in this world, and also use to improve the conditions of the world, Allah commands him in these words regarding women. O prophet, tell thy wives and thy daughters and the women of believers to let down upon them their overgarments. This is more proper, so that they may be known and not be given trouble. And Allah is forgiving, merciful. Now, why did Allah mention the word trouble? That seems kind of odd. Well, that's a preventive measure. Well, it's a measure for decency, first of all, but now in this world, it becomes a necessity. So we have the answer to that question today with the exploitation and abuse of women and girls. Now, women are in trouble, no doubt about that, and it's only going to get worse. Why? Well, disregard for and rejection of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's divine guidance and commands will bring about the self-inflicted chastisement of Allah. So no matter what governments and others attempt to do to curtail the trafficking of women and black women in the inner cities, you will not be successful because you have rejected the means by which you can be successful. You can't have it both ways. You can't flaunt immorality and indignity and expect to be protected from a God who wants you to be moral and dignified. Now, I don't know how some women may take to that, but the fact that women are being hoisted up and put into sexual trafficking situations means that you don't have the power to overcome men who think like that. So no matter how great and big and muscular you think you are not made to overcome the strength of a man. And hence, we have a crisis among women. So you have a leader and a guide and a man who has the power of Allah with him. That is the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Why don't you get on his side and clean up so that you can be saved? But until that's done, we will face atrocities that we have never seen before. Now, let me continue in proving my point through this book, the Holy Quran, because you and I got to know that what we think is coming afar off, we're living it every day of our lives. Now, in the Holy Quran, Allah states, for those who disbelieve in their Lord, that's specific. And the Lord is one who brings people or brings a person or people from one state to another state of progressiveness until they meet the completion of where Allah wants them to be. So our Lord is the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. I don't care if you believe it or not, but his work proves in his teaching from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that he can take our lives and make them better incrementally, really by leaps. Who among the Caucasian people is doing that and have done that? So let's continue with these verses. And for those who disbelieve in their Lord is the chastisement of hell. And evil is the resort, meaning you're going to be in it. When they are cast therein, they will hear a loud moaning of it as it heaves, almost bursting for fury. Whenever a group is cast into it, its keepers ask them, did not a warner come to you? They say, yea, indeed a warner came to us, but we denied and said, Allah has revealed nothing. You are only in great error. And they say, had we but listened and pondered, that's all, we should not have been among the inmates of the burning fire. Thus they will confess their sins. Far from good are the inmates of the burning fire. Now these verses make it clear that the divine chastisement of the people will continue until they submit to Allah. That's made clear in both books. Allah will keep his cataclysmic wrath at bay as long as there's a divine warner among the people. Now, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is destined to depart to the great mother Weal. We know that. But I'm raised up to testify and bear witness to both of them. So Allah will keep his cataclysmic wrath at bay. But that don't mean it's going to be easy for you or me. Allah will also keep nuclear destruction from engulfing the earth. So I hear all the people yapping about nuclear this, nuclear that. You think that Allah's going to let a government cast a nuclear bomb to destroy billions of people? No, they will be kept at bay. Therefore, humanity will waddle in the anguish of our own wickedness and rejection of the will of God. Now that seems pretty frightening, that things that we've discussed so far can get worse. Now, back to the imminent departure of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan to the great Mother Weal, or Mother Plane, which will come through his crucifixion, part of it, by the synagogue of Satan's flood of slander coming through Hollywood and other mass media pathways, and this is described in the book of Revelations in the Bible. Now, the Bible describes a set of events that reveal the purpose of the crucifixion and the duties of those who are blessed to continue to believe in the Messiah, in the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, even after the synagogue of Satan's flood of slander. Now, if you believe in the Honorable Louis Farrakhan after their flood of slander, you have indeed been blessed. And if you disbelieve in him, then you have been cursed. I'll just put it that simple. Now, these events are described in the Gospel of John, wherein Jesus is dealing with the realities of his forthcoming crucifixion, meaning that Jesus was well aware of what was about to transpire concerning his life. He wasn't oblivious to his crucifixion. He wasn't taken by surprise and by storm. And it says it in these verses. Jesus states, "Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this cause came I unto this hour. Father, glorify thy name." Then came there a voice from heaven saying, "I have glorified it and will glorify it again." The people therefore that stood by heard it, and they said that it thundered. Others said, "An angel spake to him." Jesus answered and said, "This voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me." Now, again, Jesus is well aware of the circumstances involving, and he understands it's not for my sake, but for your sake. We're going to take that up in another message, Allah willing. Now, this last verse, if I be lifted up, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This last verse applies to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, because by lifting up either, you lift up both or the other. And that which is being lifted is the teachings and divine guidance that both men brought, which will continue to transform people, releasing them from the grip of the synagogue of Satan. Well, what are you saying, Karriem? I'm saying that the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's departure to the wheel does not mean the end of his message. He has taught for more than 60 years, and many of his messages, whole and in part, are available to you and I. So we'll be able to feed on this, even while under the great chastisement of our own wickedness and refusal to obey Allah and just do right and have just simple, decent human behavior. Now, since the families of the synagogue of Satan know this, then they must use everything within their power to deceive us into not wanting anything to do with the Honorable Louis Farrakhan by slandering his reputation through false allegations, some of which will likely include false allegations that he's a womanizer, false allegations that he abused women, false allegations that he was involved in homosexual behavior, false allegations that he was involved in various forms of extortion, false allegations of conspiracies associating him with murder and other criminal behavior. Well, how do you know this, Karriem? Because it's written in these books. The major prophets of God, Abraham, Lot, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, David, Solomon, and Jesus, were all falsely charged with wickedness and crimes. So the defense of the Messiah's domestic life, that is the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's domestic life, will have a ripple effect because it will exonerate these and other prophets from these false charges. Now, inshallah, in the next message, we will show aspects of the fulfillment of the narrative of Joseph in the life of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Thank you for listening, and may Allah continue to bless you and your families. Assalamu alaikum.